So Chapter 4, Key Issue 4, covers the what sustainability challenges do folk and popular culture face. The sustainability challenges for folk culture have to do with the increased connection with popular culture. And as you have an increased connection with global popular culture, it makes maintaining centuries old practices difficult. So it's hard to maintain your traditional culture once you have access to popular culture. The impacts of globalization on the landscape also create challenges in maintaining a unique landscape. So it's more difficult to maintain your folk customs when you have growing up around you cities with cars and roadways and televisions and soccer jerseys and Starbucks. And the global diffusion of popular culture beliefs changes the roles of women to men, and that's embedded in some folk customs. And while I see that as a positive, and I think most people in developed countries would see that as a positive, if you are a man in power in a developing country, you would not see that as a positive. And so that can lead to social challenges. So the diffusion of some popular customs can adversely impact the environmental. So popular culture customs can adversely impact environmental quality in two main ways. When we look at pop culture has a larger impact on the environment and environmental quality. So pollution of the landscape is when everything starts to look the same. So you're taking down regional variations in homes. You have less forest. You can see less of the physical geography, so less of the physical characteristics of a town. And if you get off the highway, so if you're driving on a road trip and you get off a highway or an interstate, and you drive through like that town, most of them look the same. So in the book, they have a picture of a town in Illinois, and you see like a Hardee's, and you see a Dollar General, and you see an auto repair shop, and you see a cell phone store, and that's very similar to what you'd see if you got off the highway almost anywhere. It's like next time you go on a trip with your family, whether you're going to Orlando, if you're driving up to Georgia, next time you go on a trip and you get off the highway, like pay attention. Can you tell what town you're in just by looking at the stores around you, or does the landscape look like it does almost anywhere else? Things like golf courses, which are an important part of leisure activities in the United States, they highly disrupt the environment. So first you have to build the golf course, which requires lots of construction and modification of the land. You have to move earth, you have to make hills, you have to make water features, and then to maintain it, you use lots of irrigation. It uses fertilizer to keep the grass green. It uses different pesticides like insecticides to prevent insect damage and fungicides to protect fungal disease. And then to mow those lawns, so you're using lots of water, you're using pesticides, you're using fertilizers. Fertilizers and pesticides can impact water quality. Irrigation can decrease water quantity. And then you have to use like large lawnmowers, like the large riding lawnmowers. And those large riding lawnmowers use fossil fuels, which further contributes to climate change, and and it leads to the need for the extraction of more fossil fuels. And many popular culture items are, like, especially our items of convenience, require the depletion of natural resources. So eating meat is a popular trend in developed countries. So the more developed country you are, the more access you have to meat. Meat is expensive. It takes a lot of land and a lot of water to raise animals to eat them for food, which is why meat ends up being more than, like usually like broccoli. So the more wealthy a nation as a whole is, the more money people have to spend on meat, which means the more land and water and resources that could be used for foods. Like when we feed corn to cattle, we are using up all the land and water and fertilizers used to raise that corn to feed the cattle so we can eat them. And so eating meat is an expensive venture, and it's popular in popular culture in developed countries. Other things like minerals, so cell phones, right? Cell phones and electronics use a lot of minerals. Cans of soda. Fossil fuels. Fossil fuels in our cars, in an airplane for travel. The fossil fuels we burn to run air conditioning and movie theaters. The transport of materials, even like the fossil fuels used for plastic water bottles, because plastic comes from petroleum derivatives. So most plastic is made from fossil fuels. So if you look at a bottle of water, you have the plastic used to make the bottle. Probably the fossil fuels used to run the factory where the water is bottled. The fossil fuels used in the truck to transport the water across the country. If you bought it in a vending machine or a grocery store, the fossil fuels used to keep, the store, the vending machine running. The materials used to build the asphalt that the car runs on, so our items of convenience are very energy rich and very mineral rich, and we deplete resources in that way. Here it shows you the waste versus recycling rate. You can see that we throw way more stuff away in the U.S. than we do recycle it, although it's gone down a little bit. When you're looking at the role of women in folk culture, like in a developing country, your book goes into the dowry rates, the dowry practices in India. And so traditionally, before the 1900s, so before the 20th century, when a man married a woman, he paid her family, gave them a gift. In the 1900s, that practice switched. And so the family of the bride started to give the groom a gift. And that gift, as the 20th century advanced, became, usually money or property. And that started to be seen as a source of income. So you could marry a woman because you needed a supplemental income. You needed more money. And this led to a change in the way they treated women. So women were treated. So like in 2010, there were over 8,000 women killed by their husbands because they felt their dowries were too small. And over 90,000 women were essentially either tortured or beat because of dowry disputes as well. So the practice was banned in 1961, but most of the laws are ignored. And so something that can increase the anger and violence from the male's perspective in India, and we're not agreeing with them, right? I'm not saying that they are right, but as popular culture makes its way through India and women see that they have, as women gain access to more education, more economic control, more ability to control land, more control in the government, the ability for men to treat them that way starts to disappear. And that can lead to a backlash as it's changing. So popular culture can challenge the subservient role of women in a country, and that can lead to an increase in violence while the transition is happening. And so we want to make sure that we support the empowerment of women in other countries. But it's best to let the women in that country dictate how that change needs to come, because there could be consequences we don't even think of. So if we think about like gender equality and education in India, people in the United States may not equate that with a rise in domestic violence at first. So it's really important to work with people in the area as you're working to change, customs or roles, to minimize the unintended consequences. You know what I mean? Also, make sure you read about the Amish, the case study of the Amish. The Amish are a really well-known U.S. folk culture. They diffuse their culture through relocation, diffusion, or through migration. Their distinct cultural traditions involve limited mechanization and no electricity. And because their concentration of Amish people is heavy in Pennsylvania and other states too, but particularly in Pennsylvania, where land is becoming more developed and more expensive, a traditional practice for the Amish was to give their son, when he becomes an adult, a farm and land of his own, and then he could, raise his family and farm on that land. Land is so expensive in Pennsylvania that that's no longer really possible. And so what you have now is the Amish people selling their land in Pennsylvania and moving to where land is cheaper in Kentucky, so they can continue their practices. But it's not impossible to see in 10 or 15 or 20 years that now you're selling land in Kentucky and moving somewhere else. And so rising costs of land can also lead to the lack of sustainability for folk culture. So when we're looking at sustainability for folk culture, we want to look at how do we preserve aspects of culture that people want to keep, and how do we help people change their culture and adapt in a way that meets the needs of that population. So how do we help the Amish people continue with their cultural practices when it clashes with the high cost of land for our development? And how do we help, or how do we support the changing gender roles in the country in a way that fits the needs of the women in that country? Because we don't want to do things that would place them at even greater danger than they already will be.